So at this point, we have the time to give an honor to present the F. Scott Fitzgerald Award for Outstanding Achievement in American Literature by the F. Scott Fitzgerald Literary Conference this day, October 15th, to Richard Powers.
Thanks. Hiya. I feel like I can retire now. Especially after such a generous introduction. Yeah. Thanks, Stan. Thanks to everyone. But I have to single out Alice McDermott for that spectacular, spectacular keynote. Deeply moving, deeply playful, deeply true. Never have I loved man more, nor woman neither, than when I read Alice McDermott. There is also a very troubling, disturbed side to reading her too, for me personally, which is, as I turn the pages, I feel, I don't have a lot more time. I have to learn how to write. So beautiful. When I learned that I was going to be given an award named after F. Scott Fitzgerald, I felt a pleasure much more befitting a younger man. When I learned that receiving the award would involve having to say a few words about Fitzgerald's influence on my own work, I felt all the anxiety of an old guy. Fitzgerald wrote about intensely social people with material longings and class aspirations, while I wrote, as Stan mentioned, about loners and solitaries, searching for pattern and meaning in all kinds of extra-social and intellectual pursuits. I honestly wasn't sure what I could bring to the Fitzgerald party. In an understandably famous quip, Mark Twain once said, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. When I got to 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in 7 years." Reading Fitzgerald as a young man, I thought, these stories are just about people making themselves miserable over class, wealth, and privilege. Only in my 60s, now, coming back to consider the work, do I realize these stories are all about the damage to the individual inflicted by a culture that forecloses on any other kind of meaning. I was shocked by how much the man had learned since I first read it. There is, in Fitzgerald's characters, an immense hunger for connection not mediated by stuff, status, and admiration. That hunger also became mine, and in retrospect, I can see how Fitzgerald's critique of commodity-mediated human exceptionalism helped to lead me back into a living world, where meanings are constantly being made in ways that dwarf us all. His writing has given me something else too, a thing that seems at first glance smaller, but probably isn't. I mean the way that his sentences stop and at times burst into fountains of purely ludic pleasure, even inside a tragic frame. Santayana in the comic Mask says, "What could be more splendidly sincere than the impulse to play in real life? To rise on the rising wave of every feeling and let it burst, if it will, into the foam of exaggeration. Life is not a means. The mind is not a slave or a photograph. It has a right to enact a pose, to assume a panache, and to create what prodigious allegories it will for the mere sport and glory of it. Play has become increasingly important to me as an old guy, and the eternally young Fitzgerald is an enduring reminder of how the game is best played. So given these thoughts about reader reevaluation, thoughts that actually dovetail nicely with Alice's reflections on rereading, and considering how the reputational revision that makes Fitzgerald's own story so poignant and powerful, I thought I'd revisit a piece that I wrote just before writing the overstory. I've only written a handful of short stories in my life, and this may be the one that means the most to me. It's called To the Measures Fall. The epigraph is from Borges. The title, of course, is from Shakespeare. All titles are from Shakespeare. The epigraph is from Borges. We are made for art, made for memory. We are made for poetry. Or perhaps we are made for oblivion. In this read-through, you are biking through the Cotswolds when you come across it. Spring of '63. 21 years old, your junior year abroad at the University of York, after a spring term green with Chaucer, Milton, Byron, and Swinburne. Remember Swinburne? Year one of a life newly devoted to words. Your recent change of course has crushed your father. He's long hoped that you would follow through on that Kennedy-inspired dream of community service. You, who might have become a first-rate social worker. You, who might have done good things for the species, or at least for the old neighborhood. But life will be books for you from here on. Nothing has ever felt more preordained. Term's out, and it's time to see every square mile of this island. Bicycle clips, a blue guide, transistor radio, and skin-hugging rain. Villages slip down valley roads as twisty as the clauses in Henry James. The book turns up in a junk shop in an old Saxon market town whose name you will remember as almost certainly having an M in it. Among the rusted baby buggies and ancient radios, you find old cooking magazines, books on fly tying and photography, late 50s spy novels with cardboard covers worn soft as felt. The thing pops out at you. To the Measures Fall, by someone named Elton Wentworth. There's nothing else like it in the shop. It's a fat tome with rough-cut pages in deluxe tooled binding. The dust jacket has disappeared, but the front matter suggests that you know all about Mr. Wentworth already. Born in 1888, the author of 12 previous books and the winner of awards too numerous to mention. The first line reads, "A freak snow hit that year, 2 weeks after the sand martins returned to the gravel pits near the South Downs." The first few paragraphs sketch out a hard-pressed town, Watton-on-Wold, much like this one with the M in it. On page 3, the author comes clean with the date, 1913. On the last page, a village search party finds the body of a young amputee captain who served at the Somme, lying at the bottom of the said gravel pits. Only 7 years have passed, but the lilting opening cadences have changed into dark fragments beyond all family resemblance. The book seems to be a sweeping portrait of rural England before and after the First World War. And for whatever reason, some local resident has dumped his copy at the junk dealer. You check the title page, copyright 1948. Aside from 2 bold exclamation points at the end of chapter 1, the pages are unblemished, perhaps unread. Penciled into the upper right hand of the inside front is a price, 10 and 6. Exorbitant. You draw £7 a week for student expenses. A 3-course Chinese dinner in Station Road cost only 4 shillings, and lunch in the canteen is half that. A 12-inch LP is only £1, and even a 4-minute call back to the States is cheaper than Mr. Wentworth's book. Half a guinea for a used novel you'd never heard of? It's crazy. But something about that opening line is too strange to resist. Besides, you've just devoted your life to literature. You graze the start of chapter 2, where Trevor, a spindly farmer's son with Addison's disease, baffles his parents by insisting on going to university. You need to know how that beginning can reach such an end. The shop's owner is a beaked old man with a gray hairline like a cowl slipping off his head. It's humiliating to bargain with him, but you're desperate. How much do you offer the junk store owner for his used book? You are, by the way, female. No known complications of any size. Lots of folks think you shouldn't be out biking alone, even in the Cotswolds. See page 214 to 223 of Mr. Wentworth's epic. How much would you have offered for the book had you been male? You buy the book, lug it around on the rest of the bike tour, take it back north with you, but somehow fail to read it. When summer ends, and with it your English fantasy, you're shocked to discover how many essential novels you've bought and haven't gotten around to. Now the problem is packing them all into a suitcase lighter than 44 pounds. You could mail them to the States, but they'd cost more to ship than you spent to buy them. You resort to the time-honored system of 3 piles. 1, keep for all time. 2, suspend in purgatory. 3, cast out into the outer darkness. By the evening before the homeward flight to the Measures Fall is stuck stubbornly in limbo, along with Wheelock's What is Poetry, James Purdy's Malcolm, The Bull from the Sea by Mary Renault, John Brayne's runaway bestseller Life at the Top, and Updike's The Centaur, which has gotten mixed reviews. Life at the Top is small and light and might be tricky to get hold of in the States. Who knows how long Updike will be around? Malcolm, on the other hand, is already on every undergraduate syllabus list in the country. Renault, Guilty Pleasure, is the one you'd really love to have in your carry-on. The further adventures of Theseus and Hippolyta with sun-drenched temples, earthquakes, and possible human god miscegenation. How better to fill 8 hours of captive reading? But your bag will hold only 4 more volumes. Choose which 2 books get dumped forever. Wentworth makes the cut, if only as a souvenir of that magical cycling tour. Weirdly, browsing the bookshop in the Oceanic Terminal at Heathrow, you see a reprint of one of the earlier novels about coal miners in Wales. It's a penguin with that pale green spine synonymous with great literature. There's a jacket quote from Winston Churchill calling Wentworth this island's Balzac, our much revered, much imitated national asset. And another from Dame Edith Sitwell, DBE, calling him England's most distinguished living author of the novel of Community. That national asset makes him sound like a hulking stone country house that pauperized aristocrats give away for tax deductions. And most distinguished feels a bit backhanded against mods, rockers, the angry young men, and beyond the fringe. But two immortal literary lions praised this man to the skies. What an incredible deal, getting the junk shop owner to take 8 shillings. Clearly, the balding shop owner didn't know what he was selling. Far out over the Atlantic, approaching Greenland, a twinge of conscience eats away at you. What good is all the cultivation in the world if you're just going to cheat ignorant people? How much should you have paid the shopkeeper? Exceed his proposed price if needed. Back in the States, you look up Elton Wentworth. He isn't England's most distinguished living anything. He died right around the time that you realized you'd sooner sell cigarettes from a shoulder tray than go into social work. In addition to sheep in the Cotswolds and coal in Wales, he's done Lincolnshire fishermen and 3 generations of Brummie factory workers. He's not England's Balzac. He's the James Michener of the Midlands. You read the first 100 pages to The Measures Fall, hacking your way through thickets of dialect. The prose can be brutally beautiful. But the semester starts, you fall in love, get deflowered, watch Kennedy get killed, see the Beatles invade, get high and listen to Coltrane and discover Heller, Ellison, Ferlinghetti, and Bellow, writing that flows across the page in huge, bright swaths you never knew English would permit. So World War I was a bad scene. Aren't we over that yet? And what was Wentworth doing, bringing out a book wrapped in Edwardian nostalgia 3 years after Dachau? You graduate in spring and pack up your worldly possessions again, just as the USS Maddox fires on 3 patrol boats in the Gulf of Tonkin, letting Johnson widen the war in a country that, until recently, neither you nor Wentworth nor the vast majority of that year's most celebrated living novelists could have told apart from fiction. Does the book go to Goodwill, Salvation Army, or the 25-cent pile at your graduation lawn sale? You survived 2 years of graduate classes, the general comprehensive test, flubbing the question on Tobias Smollett, marriage to a Faulkner guy, and a grueling 400-book special field exam on the Electra complex in post-war American prose, a subject you hate already long before your committee can lob the first question. All the while, Biafra, Black Power, the levitation of the Pentagon, My Lai, back-to-back assassinations, the siege of Chicago, street warfare, and city centers burning in an annual summer ritual. Drugs are everywhere, making people see God or murder their families. Books go surreal, psychedelic, and sometimes you wonder whether they're causing the mayhem or just profiteering. The dissertation, Your Baggy Monster, becomes a 4-year excuse to read everything except those writers you threatened to write about. On a hot June Thursday early in the new decade, right around the day when 5 men break into the DNC headquarters in DC, you find yourself patrolling your shelves like a hopeful bidder at an estate sale. It's a shock to come across that deluxe binding, which you distinctly remember throwing out a long time ago. The Cotswolds, Cruel Joke, Elgarian Imperial Residue. You take it down and browse. You stop to fix dinner for your husband, who, invalid of high modernism, cannot fix it for himself. But you're back at Wentworth until 4 a.m., when you end up down at the bottom of the Cotswold gravel pit, 1920, your throat feeling like you've been taking swabs with a pipe cleaner. You don't know what hurts more, the swirling moral turbulence of the book, or the belated discovery that everything you thought about the thing is wrong. you missed everything. Register, mood, irony and ambiguity, subtleties of characterization, narrative arc, even basic plot points. You can't read. It's like finding out at 30 that you're adopted. You're not yet sure it's great literature, but the thing that took you underwater and held you there for the better part of 13 hours, and 2 days later, you're still winded. Its single history-slapped village is a whole world whose heft and weight and strange, sinuous tangle of syntax stands for nothing but itself. Its portraits, particularly Sarah, mother of doomed Captain Trevor and furtive wife of idealism-scarred Francis Beck, seem so clearly ripped from microscopic observation that it's cheating to call them fiction. This is not your life. It's not your time or place. It's just a scrap of torn diary floating up from a scorched village. What does the thing want from you? Give the book a final grade. Fail, low pass, pass, pass with honors, highest distinction. You make your husband read it. You do the Lysistrata thing until he does. This is a mistake, as he reads it way too fast. Very well done, he reports, wanting his sugar cube. Skillful. First-rate social realism. Why haven't more people written about this guy? It isn't skillful. It isn't social realism. You read it again, taking a week this time. On the third take, the book gets more troubling, more weirdly allegorical. You can't put your finger on what bothers you. Something to do with being moved against your better judgment. You lie awake on a hot August night, wondering how a thing might be good and real and true for a while, then made irrelevant or worse by later events. You've gotten very close with your thesis advisor. In fact, if you remember right, you're sleeping with him. The two of you are in an actual bed somewhere, in the dark, a luxury you can no longer imagine how you managed. Maybe it's an OPEC oil crisis thing. Turn off the lights when not in use. The two of you are playing that old favorite. Which classic would you never dare admit to anyone but your lover in the dark that you haven't read? You offer Silas Lapham, and he ups the ante with Billy Budd. And you try to trump with Sound and the Fury, which he blows out of the water with Huck Finn. You ask him if he's ever read any Wentworth. He just snickers, thinking it another game. You obsess on the thing. You read all the criticism. Most of it damns itself with due diligence. Trevor Beck and Erickson's theory of social development. Wool, surplus value, and class unrest in Wentworth's Watton on Wold. No article has an insight strong enough to explain why you should be reading it rather than another book again. You learn all kinds of things about Elton Wentworth, some of which you wish you hadn't learned. Blacklisted for pacifist activity under the Defense of the Realm Act, went to Russia between the wars and came back extolling the enlightened socialist state. Right up until Munich, he was a prominent appeaser, but come September 1939, he turned British super patriot and personal propagandizer for Churchill, which helps explain the latter's jacket blurb. After the war, he fought decolonization tooth and claw in a series of interviews with dozens of natives on 3 continents who all declared the British Empire the best thing ever to happen to its colonial subjects. At the age of 81, he was jailed for 3 months for violent demonstrations against nuclear weapons. In short, the author of that autonomous, unjudging book with no villains and fewer heroes, where every moral position is plausible but flawed, is himself a hopeless, card-carrying, repeat-offending true believer. Grade Elton Wentworth's public performance. Separate marks for form, style, and intent. In one of the competing Wentworth biographies, you come across a photo of a note to Wentworth from Sir Winston himself. The letter's signature vaguely resembles the inked scrawl that you've never paid attention to on the inside front cover of your copy, underneath the penciled price that now fills you with shame. The signature in the reproduced note reads Winnie. The drooping, obscured squiggle in your copy looks more like H.H. Clunlunch. You're insane, of course, hallucinating from over-research. No way on any plausible earth that a book belonging to one of this century's most famous personages could end up in a junk shop in the Cotswolds. Winston Churchill, Nobel laureate in literature, isn't going to write his name in his bloody books. If found, return to House of Commons, London. And the Queen marks her stuff with a Dymo embosser. You try to erase the penciled price for a better look, but you only succeed in smearing the signature. You look up every occurrence of Churchill's signature on record in the university's library. There is a similarity. The book gives nothing else to go on except the 2 bold exclamation points at the end of the first chapter. The one on the right seems distinctly Churchillian. You take the book to an appraiser, but you get paranoid. This is exactly the kind of scenario where the naive get bilked. On your next trip to the city, you bring it to an antiquarian whom you've bought from many times. He listens to your theory with a tight, embarrassed smile. He says that even if you do get the signature certified, which could cost considerable blood, toil, tears, and sweat, the simple signature without any further marginalia may not greatly increase the book's value. Given the dicey nature of the scribble, you might not want to pay for appraisal, but he's willing to give you $50 for the copy, for being a good customer. $50 could buy 2 years of used novels. Deal or no deal? You keep the copy for reasons reason doesn't understand. But 2.5 months later, you wipe out on literature altogether. You run out of time in the graduate program, and still no diss. Your husband says, no kids until you finish, but you can't finish. The thesis isn't even embarrassing. Psychoanalytic readings reek of 6 years ago, and this new post-structural stuff gives you hives. You crash and burn. The house goes to pot. You glue yourself to the Watergate hearings for weeks. The whole mad circus is like a Dickens serial saga. You talk to the screen, cheering and hissing. You even develop a little thing for Sam Irvin. You get a job adjuncting at a nearby college, intros and surveys. But drumming up enthusiasm for Wharton and Cather is hard. These days it's all Pynchon and Barthelme, Coover and Gaddis and gas. The cannon goes up in smoke. You realize belatedly that you're a co-opted false consciousness servant of empire, a capo of privileged, heteronormative white paternalism, but it's too late to retool. Around the fall of Saigon, plagued by those films of people on the embassy rooftop clutching the runners of escaping helicopters, you bail out into law school. It's the only practical choice. And isn't law at bottom all about the same act of eternal verbal negotiation as reading? The marriage breaks up under the pressure of L1, and your only recreational reading for the next 2 years is the congressional record. You get a good job with a decent boutique firm specializing in intellectual property. None of your dozens of bright, well-read colleagues have ever heard of Watton on Wold. You marry again, this time for real, to a big police procedural fan in corporate litigation. At the last possible moment, you have kids, 3 of them, 1 reader and 2 watchers who get their ABCs from purple and green television puppets. Nothing will ever light up the cortex faster than cathode rays. Yet with your reader daughter, the whole awful, gut-wrenching seduction happens all over again. Urban ducklings, wild things, purple crayons, it doesn't matter. Your daughter, glazed-eyed and body-snatched, chants, "Read, Mommy, read." Like she's off in Neverland already, even before the first verb. And you, fallen Wendy, eviscerated by the eternal recurrence of it all, hear Peter snarl at you for growing guilty, big, and old, while something inside you cries, "Woman, woman, let go of me." A few years pass, and still your daughter is reading furiously. You'll lose her eventually to the rising flood of film, the swelling archive of video just now offering whole new republics of visual democracy. Who knows how long the page can hold her attention? Do you rush her into the good stuff while you can? Maybe, if you time things right, the whole crumbling Edwardian bewilderment of Watton on Wold might strike her as some kind of hyper-Narnia. When should you push Wentworth on your Jane? 1, never too early. 2, never too late. 3, never gonna happen. You watch your children's rising action. They become the heroes of their own plots, ancient genres in unrecognizable new bindings. The 80s pass while your energies are spent elsewhere, on building up the college tuition war chests, on making partner, on helping companies copyright common English words. You still read for pleasure, all kinds of things. The hunger is still there. But as with sex, the costumes must grow ever more elaborate to achieve the same transport. You're caught somewhere between reading for recognition and reading for estrangement. Mostly what you read are reviews. Too few hours left to do more than scan all the books that you know you'd love. At least you can read what the gatekeepers say about this fall's lineup. And often, imagining a book from its synopsis beats what you do manage to slog through. The reviews accumulate faster than you can flip through them. What you really need is a thumbnail summary of the thumbnail summaries. A year or so after Grenada or Iran-Contra or some such thing, while blasting through last year's stack of unread New Yorkers prior to pitching them, you come across the fact that To the Measure's Fall, long out of print, is being reissued in an annotated Essential Library edition, part of a general renaissance of Wentworth, who, the review laments, has been in a 20-year decline. The review recalls measures the once celebrated, now forgotten British Magic Mountain. He claims that Wentworth's wartime Midlands might once more have as much to reveal as any of the marginalized regions of the earth. Can that possibly include Lesotho, Lebanon, the Punjab? The retrospective appreciation feels like one of those lifetime achievement awards that you get for having the courtesy of staying dead. The new covers for the Essential Library edition are dazzling. The one for Measures makes Wentworth look like the next Alice Walker. You're not sure what constitutes a decent interval between much revered national asset and unfairly undervalued. For the reviewer, the revival proves that the one universal truth about literary merit: quality will eventually surface in the run of time. The trick is to stop time at just the right moment. Who is Elton Wentworth exactly? Choose one. One, the formerly most unjustly underrated author of his generation. Two, the even more formerly most justly overrated author of his generation. Three, the currently least unjustly re-rated author of his generation. New annotated copies flood the market. Does your boat go up? You break down and pay an appraiser 10 times what you would have 10 years ago to look at your copy. Churchill's marked up volume, it turns out, went off at Sotheby's for £900, just as the new Wentworth Renaissance hit. Your copy belonged to a Cotswold sheep farmer named H.H. Cleanleach. The appraiser offers you $10 off his fee. The boys in information processing install a terminal in your office that fulfills your old dream: rapid access to abstracts of all the articles you can no longer afford to read. In between researching briefs, you follow the boomlet in Wentworth studies. The reader response people take him up. Then those who study reputational revision. There's a minor heyday in swarming any author still in the state of pre-post exhaustion, just before the idea of single author studies gives out. A modernist at New Mexico State proves that To the Measure's Fall was really written around 1928, suppressed by Wentworth for 2 decades, then published over his objections in a form he didn't want. A Barnard Associate Prof proves that half of the novel was the work of Wentworth's longtime mistress. A graduate student at Indiana proves the book is riddled with historical error. Scholars of all rank show how Wentworth was the product of 1,000 horrific cultural blindnesses and Eurocentric brutalities. Write a brief letter to no one about what you once thought the book might mean. The Berlin Wall falls and the evil empire falls with it. The Cold War ends, and for a moment, history does too. You stop reading much of anything that isn't at least 20 years old. You don't exactly remember the 90s. The Gulf, of course, something about Somalia and Sarajevo, smoke everywhere, lots of variously colored ribbons tied around America's trees. The firm keeps dangling the promise of senior partnership, but it never quite happens. The 1993 feature film adaptation of To the Measure's Fall stars Daniel Day-Lewis and Emma Thompson. There's an extended hallucinatory sequence depicting the suicidal slow walk at the Somme, filmed in Scotland, graphically matched to a torrid sex scene on the heath outside Watton-on-Wold, filmed in a Hollywood sound studio. A tie-in paperback edition appears with a glossy movie still cover featuring the gorgeous leads. Rate the film. Worth a theater ticket? Worth videotaping when it comes to TV? Worth denouncing at a dinner party? Worth a class action suit by readers everywhere? On your 55th birthday, the age when terminally ill Sarah Beck must identify her son's body at the foot of the Cotswolds gravel pit, you join a book group. The kids are grown, the career's on autopilot, the husband is off playing paintball, and it's time to read again. Books are back in more flavors than ever. Cool books, slick books, innovative remixes, massive doorstops, funny jeux d'esprit, weepy Uyghur Bildungsromans, caustic family sagas from Kazakhstan. Books in every market niche and biome, avant, après, post, retro. Back, too, is the long-dead art of communal reading. Okay, maybe a few of your book group members are in it for the finger food, but you've forgotten what a pleasure it is to discuss out loud. Aimless talk about love and lust, responsibility, hope, and pain. Together, over a couple of years, you read the major national selections. Your fellow members bring their old secret freight out of deep storage. You take 9 months to work up your request. You're unsure of your friends, unsure of your ability to reread, unsure of just what's in that treacherous and mutable book these days. You read it slowly this time, a chapter a night over the course of weeks. This time, though, the book is no more than a grand, futile gesture of nevertheless in the face of human frailty. Francis Beck's refusal to believe that his wife is ill, a feckless cowardice that turns by insistence almost heroic. Alice Wright's paralyzing premonition that she can't act upon without destroying the man who would destroy her. Trevor's premeditated signal to Alice, ready to launch itself from beyond the grave. 2 club members report flinging the book across the room in rage. Another demands her 13 hours back. Accusations multiply. It's mawkish. It's cerebral. It's meandering. It's manipulative. It's cold and cunning and misanthropic. It's wrecked by redemption. How are we supposed to care about these characters? I just wanted them all to get a life. But a few of the group don't know what hit them. One friend hated the first 50 pages, but wanted 50 more at the end. The quietest man in the group comes back from Watton-on-Wold, wrapped in brittle bewilderment at his own existence. It's the custom of the group, introduced by the male minority, of assigning every book a letter grade. Yours gets a C+. What % of your pleasure has gone out of the book forever? Fractional numbers permitted. Overnight, the World Wide Web weaves tightly around you. A novelty at first, then invaluable, then life support, then heroin. It's a chance to find everything you've ever lost. College friends, out-of-print rarities, quotes that had vanished forever. Your online hours must come from somewhere, and it isn't your TV viewing. You lose whole days on the roller coaster of real-time eBay auctions. Volumes of Wentworth go off at every price from triple digits down to $1.99. You rescue a few to give to friends someday or whenever. It thrills you to discover a site where all the shameless recidivist Wentworth readers in the world gather to post their guilty pleasures. You subscribe to a feed. 6 months later, the community spirals into civil war as a thread between sock puppets and anonymous avatars goes up in flames. You watch the Amazon ratings for To the Measures fall steadily, from a high of 4.3 to a low somewhat below that of a defective wood chipper. The wisdom of crowds means to send Wentworth into a third and final eclipse. You consider logging in at comfort suites across the country, creating all kinds of persona to rescue the book for another generation of Wentworth readers whenever they come back to the Earth's surface. How many aliases do you create to rate the book? 1. Just enough to boost the book back to its rightful rating. 2. Sarah Beck would never create an alias. Then the new century. Terror and sci-fi become life's dominant genres. War turns perpetual. The last print newspaper disappears. More words get posted in 5 years than were published in all previous history. Global warming floods the coastal areas inhabited by 500 million people. 1/10 of the planet dies of drought and tainted water. Name the book that best captures life as now lived. 2 months before you plan to retire, you learn you have a massive hilar tumor nestled up in the stem of your lungs where nothing can reach it. It's right where Sarah Beck's was, if you imagine right. Your daughter, the reader, brings you the book to keep you company in a state-of-the-art cancer center, in your bed near a window that opens out onto a brick wall 10 feet across a cement courtyard. You read it again. Not the whole book, of course. You couldn't possibly read a whole of anything. But you manage a few pages looking for a creature that recedes in front of your gaze. This time, the book is about the shifting delusion of shared need, our imprisonment in something as traceless as air. It's about a girl who knew nothing at all, taking a bike ride through the Cotswolds one ridiculous spring, mistaking books for life and those rolling hills of metaphor for truth. It's about a little flash, glimpsed for half a paragraph at the bottom of a left-hand page that fills you with something almost like knowing. A freak snow hits late that year. You lie in bed an hour from your next morphine, your swollen index finger marking a secret place in the spine-cracked volume, the passage that predicted your life. For a moment, you are lucid and equal to any story. Score the world on a scale from 1 to 10. Say what you'd like to see happen in the sequel.